What's going on? It's Libb Thims. Today we're going to do an impromptu book review of Abioism, published on 11 October A66 or 2021 AD. Today is 16 September A67. And at the bottom we have the paperback version shown on Amazon, dated 66 Anno Elementium. And we're going to look through the hardcover version shown here. Here is a picture of the Mulholland Drive, LA Sunset Toast. And the hardcover version is shown here. To begin with, we first come to Francis Crick of Molecules and Men. Let us abandon the word alive. This was arrived at amid his neo-vitalism debates in the wake of his discovery of the structure of DNA. Here we see that the root of the word bio, or bios in Greek, is the number 282 in alphanumerics, and it corresponds to the number 888 divided by pi. The number 888 is the sum of 6 rows of the solar magic square, which equals 6x6, plus one diagonal and another diagonal, or each diagonal or row equaling 1 on 1, which is the number of the alphanumeric number of pedia, which we see in the word encyclopedia. The praise for a section. We said over a decade ago that the question of life itself is fundamentally flawed. Here's the contents. Here is the Abioism glossary. This is the core of the book. There is currently 90 terms shown. The left column shows defunct terms. For example, number 78, William Thomson was using or upgraded us from living force to kinetic energy. And Rankin upgraded us from dead force to potential energy. So when you think about your own movements, you have to expunge from your mind these anthropomorphized terms and upgrade them to physical-chemically neutral terminologies to define your own existence. So if you look at us from above as chemical species moving on a surface according to thermodynamics, the question of where, going backwards, the life point started blurs into a nonsense conclusion that an electron moving around a proton is alive. So rather than accept this variant of absurdism or conclusions that are incongruent to the mind, we have to rewrite our belief systems to arrive at a physical, chemically neutral point of view of explaining our movements hydrogen to human, according to thermodynamics, specifically formation energies. The one term that started this book is the term biothermodynamics, and what was then called Encyclopedia of Human Thermodynamics, now called HMOpedia. And that, from the point of view of thermodynamics, one cannot technically define the word bio. If you do, you'll end up with gross mental error. So in about 2008, I began to draw a line in the sand in respect to that there is a grand, insurmountable difficulty in trying to define the term bio according to thermodynamics. Over here, to give an example, Matt Ridley, author of the Genome, states in his author snapshot that he lives in England in the year 1999, or A44, and that in 2007, copying Ridley to some extent, I wrote in my human chemistry author snapshot that I live in Chicago. And in 2013, in my new snapshot, I wrote that he reacts in Chicago. So the term lives, which does not apply to the hydrogen atom or any atom or molecule going upwards, becomes upgraded to the term he reacts in Chicago. Through what means do we move about from place to place? Michael Faraday on the various forces of matter. One of the first prefixed chapters is the molecular evolution table. If we step upward in a form change, going from hydrogen to water to methanol to urea to DNA, each of which can be defined by a molecular formula, the question of where exactly life starts becomes blurred into absurdity. So here on page 28, in respect to formation energy, I see the Darwin model, which says that light and heat struck a warm pond, and then poof, afterwards, a protein was formed and life started shortly after that. So if we switch over to the new molecular evolution point of view, we see that species were in existence when the Earth came into formation, and which gradually became heated by the sun and became more animate over time, forming us. A 26-element molecular formula. So here we are overthrowing the old view that God put the breath of life into Adam, and that's where life started. Isopsephy, that means that all words are broken down into their root numbers. This will be covered in the next book to be published, Alphanumerics, the Decoded Origin of the Alphabet. But in here you can see a basic outline of the Greek alphabet in respect to their numbers and the words they yield. For example, bios, which yields the word 282. Other words such as the word Nile equals 365, which is the number of days of the year. The abstract of the book. It's that the old view is that atoms are not alive, and that the old views of ether, vis, or force of Venus, and the caloric of Lavoisier have been upgraded to the space-time of Minkowski, electromagnetic force of Maxwell, and entropy of Clausius. So presently we define ourselves according to life, or the vis of Venus. So our mindset has not been upgraded yet to the electromagnetic force mediating views of Maxwell in respect to how we move. Here's a picture of that upgrade. This is the gist synopsis of what we're upgrading herein. Our definition of being alive is not derived from first principles. Freaky bit A65 or 2020 AD. So these are the first principles. 1 through 9. These are the main books upon which the book is based. And then we skip through. We have to expunge out of our mind the old concepts, unlearn them. Here's the game of life checkerboard. Here's the new game of life. It's called Thermodynamic Shoots and Letters. Chapter 3, When Will the Sun Be Born Tomorrow? So our old present beliefs of birth come from Egyptian mythology. Chapter 4, we get into the historical overview of how life has been slowly upgraded over time. Egyptians to Descartes, Mesler to Holbach. Sales to Maxwell. Tyndall to Latka. Tyndall is one of the biggest minds. He states that life is a wave in which no two consecutive moments of its existence is composed of the same particles. So if we are waves defined by not same particles, then the question of life or its origin becomes in need of upgrade. Latka. He also said that a person who hunts as a physicist or chemist or thermodynamicist for the origin of life is a Jabberwocky hunter. Chapter 8, Sherrington to Walker. Charles Sherrington's Man on His Nature is the premier book prior to this book being published that explains definitively that life cannot be defined by physics and chemistry. Chapter 9 touches on survival of the fittest. The V part of this is a vis a Venus root, which means you're arguing that we exist in respect to a force of Venus property. That goes through this issue that has to do with alphanumeric etymology and the fact that this was Herbert Spencer that suggested to Darwin that he should use the term survival, and how it began to increase over time after this suggestion. Chapter 10, when did Goethe become alive? Here, this steps through the question of how it becomes nonsensical to trace to the point when you became alive, from the point of view of sperm touching the egg, to the growth of you in the womb, to the Empedoclean view. Levinas talks about the force of Venus and the Vita confusion, which has resulted in the neo-vitalism arguments of Crick that we've touched on, and how this gets confused when we try to translate Lucretius is Latin and English. This touches on living force and how this got switched to kinetic energy. So instead of saying that a weight dropping is a living force and that the energy transforms from potential energy or vis mortua to kinetic energy, we now say that the movement transforms from potential energy to kinetic energy. So you have to think about your own movements according to the same model. You think you're alive because you've been told that you're alive, but at a certain point you will develop a certain amount of potential energy, and this will transform into kinetic energy through your movements of existence. Thirteen is bio equals 282, and this talks about how the number comes from solar magic squares, the solar magic square, and the mathematics of that. And now this goes back to the Egyptian Ogdoad and the Enad and the origin of the alphabet, which we now use but are ignorant of how it originated from numbers. Chapter 14 touches on the debates on the defunct theory of life, which happened over the decade from 2008 to 2019. Molecular formula of human. There's even a book called Debates of the H. Mulpane, published by David Bozans, that covers this. These are 10 of the main characters that took part in this debate over the decade. Here's me lecturing at the University of Washington on abioism. Here's modern abioists from Dahling, who argued it when he was working at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory at NASA that in respect to finding life on Mars, that this was a confused argument from the get-go. To Rogers, who started lifedoesnotexist.com, to myself, Ferris Jaber, Jerry Benovosky, to Freaky Bit, we quoted earlier. Here's Jaber's famous article, 2013. this touches on extraterrestrial life and the terminology confusion surrounding the question of finding animate, carbon-based existence on other planets, or carbon-based forms. 17 just touches on more problems when you attempt to define terms based on bioethics, biophysics, biochemistry, which means that you're basing your entire structure of your subject on nonsense. This explains morality according to formation energies. Instead of using bio as the basis of what is ethically wrong or right, we can now define what's right or wrong in terms of formation energies, whether they're going out of the system or into the system, and a coupling that results between the two. This touches on terminology reforms with respect to the word bi. And how correctly it is a matter of transformation rather than birth or death. For example, here we know that technically stars do not die. That is because the sun is not alive and it was not born or given life. Subsequently, someone such as my son, or a rock star or movie star, cannot be defined as being alive in the same exact physical, chemically neutral way that a star can be defined as being alive or dead. This touches on my good friend Patrick Fergus, who took his own existence less than a few months after this video was made. Aaron Freeman's eulogy from a physicist. Summary and recapitulation. And then we end with homework problems. Index. Exact knowledge is the enemy of vitalism. Again, vita that was translated as B originally in Greek, and I, which sums to 12. So it's the root here of this term here in alphanumerics, which is going to be the next book, some of which is touched on in the earlier chapters in this book, correlates to 12, which means that you feel full. One woman ovulates once every full moon, which occurs 12 times per year, and that a person feels alive during a full moon. That's where we get the term vitalism from. And here we see that we have the molecule AQ, which is heated and carries 2 packages of CO2. We do not define this movement as being alive, but we do define this as being alive. And so we have a semantic, and beyond that, a cosmological confusion between these two types of movement. Extra blank pages to write notes on at the end. 1, 2. Back cover summarizes how Empedocles was the first to state that we do not or are not born or have a birth and death. These do not exist according to the 4 elements and the 2 fundamental forces. And this goes upwards from Lotka, Sherrington, Francis Crick, who says we should abandon the word alive up to the present day. Rankin and William Thompson being our prime examples of how we need to reconstruct our life and expunge these dead force and living force models, with upgrade them with kinetic energy and potential energy views of our own movement. And here is a new snapshot of myself. In 2015 or A60, Thims coined the term abioism, meaning disbelief in the existence of life.